Hey there, this is Jonathan, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about formats, or the different types of bitmap images. Now, you've probably seen a number of different extensions on your computer, or lots of different types of image files, and it's really important as we as graphic designers know what those image files are. So we're going to be talking about these main formats: the JPEG, GIF, PNG, TIFF, RAW, and PSD. So the different images are used for different purposes, and that's something as graphic designers you kind of have to learn which is the right image to use. The JPEG images are going to be used for large images that have full color that we use on websites and maybe some print. The GIF is going to be used for animation. The PNG is going to be used for high quality images that have transparency as well. And the TIFF image is going to be used when we're doing print work, and that's also going to be a CMYK image that we talk about later on. Now, raw files might come from digital cameras, and those are great because they have all the color information that you could ever want. And Photoshops are for layered Adobe Photoshop design files that you need to be able to preserve the layers and open back up. Now, quick little tidbit is that a Photoshop and a TIFF file are actually the same thing. The difference though is that they save the Photoshop document as its own file format, so you can tell the difference, but it really is a TIFF file. You just don't know that. The TIFF files that we create though, we're going to make sure that we do not have any layers in. So that's something for later. So there are different characteristics of the different file formats that you should be aware of. Some of the main characteristics are that raw files have billions of colors and they're really large and they're really best for editing. JPEGs have lots of colors, but they're lossy compression, which we'll see what that means. GIF, you might say, well, it's lossless, so that's really good. The problem is that it only has 256 colors. Now, the PNG has the benefits of the JPEG, 16 million colors, but it also has the benefits of transparency, and it is a lossless format. But you'll see that generally the images are going to be bigger than the images that you use as JPEGs. The TIFFs are going to be used for print, and then the bitmap is not really an image format we use too much. Now, this is a top image file formats for the web, and so you'll notice that different formats are like vector versus raster or bitmap, JPEG, GIF, PNG. WebP should also be here as well. And there's actually a check mark missing, and let me know in the comments of this assignment or something if you can figure out which one is missing. And then there's also animation. GIFs can be animated, PNGs can now be animated, and SVGs can be animated. And then the lossy compression is JPEG. Now the one that should be in here as well is WebP, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So JPEGs are used for large images that are full color, like hero images for a website. You can see that this thing is taking up the entire width of our banner here. And so it's really important that you have a large image, but it also has enough compression so that it's not too large of an image. And that's why a JPEG is used. Now, the problem with JPEG compression is that you can over compress it really, really easily. You can see this one is way too compressed, and so it actually turns into all these little funky blocks. These are actually called macro blocks. So be really careful when you are saving the compression or saving a JPEG image to not apply too much compression, and we'll take a look at what I mean by that in a bit. And you can see this one is compressed less, but if you get up you'll still see that there are some compression artifacts, especially around the contours or change between colors. So a JPEG image doesn't mean that it's bad to have a little compression, but it really matters on how you use that image. If I use this image and it's nice and small, its original size, then I don't really see that JPEG compression. It's too small. But as soon as I scale that up and use that image in an inappropriate way, basically, then you can really start to see how that compression artifacts degrades the quality of that image. And so that's one thing to know about. Resolution defines quality of an image because the more pixels that you have, top and horizontally and vertically, determine how large you can use that image and keep that nice big quality. But the quality is also determined by the amount of compression in that image. Now, animated GIFs are lossless compression, but here you can see there's some problems with animated GIFs. So in this one, we have a full color image that when it was converted to a GIF, you can see that it can't do any more than 256 colors. So we get a lot of blocky color type stuff. You can see that the compression artifacts do look different than those that were on the JPEG. So typically with animated GIFs or GIFs in general, you want graphics that have nice sharp colors and nice sharp edges. You can see here even the edges are not feathered or anti-aliased. These are aliased edges, which means that they're going to work well with that GIF format. Now, GIFs use a compression called a run length encoding, RLE. And what that means is that you encode it by counting the number of pixels that are the exact same color as you go across. So you can see this horizontal image where all the colors are horizontal. This could be 200 black, 300 white, 600 black, 1000 orange, 200, 150 black, however many pixels this is across, I don't know, but you can see that can create a really small color or a really small file. When you separate this stuff vertically, you'll see that the file size is going to go up because there's just a lot more for it to compute. So here's another example. Notice how this first line has one white, or white 1, black 1, white 3, black 1, white 1, whereas this one just has black 7. So that line is much easier to save than the top line because of the fact that things are separated in that horizontal way or vertical way. So GIFs can also have some problems when it comes to colors. Because you have a 256 colors maximum, you can actually go all the way down to only 2 colors. And so you can have this look of like a bitmap image. And that's one of the things that can kind of be nice about a GIF. In fact, you can actually do the same thing with 8-bit color with a PNG as well. But you can see it can be not dithered, which is flat, or dithered, where it creates this dot pattern in there. Now, you might see this one has only 16 colors, and it kind of looks like an image, but that certainly is an old style type of image. In fact, that can be used in graphic design when you're trying to do something to intentionally look old style, but you do want to be aware that it's really degrading the quality of your image. And once it's saved in this image format, unless you have the original, there's no way you can get back to the full color image. Now, what GIFs do well are animation. And so this is an animated GIF, but you want to be careful that you have a limited color palette and that you have really clean graphics. And that always is going to generate a much better quality image. Now, the PNG is going to be one of the file formats that we use kind of the most in digital media, and that's because it's a high quality image format and it also includes transparency. So it is just awesome for compositing images and doing icons on websites and whatever else where you need to have good clean edges, good clean colors, and you want to have transparency. So these right here, you can see I can move around. You can even see the background just slightly through that green one. So the transparency effects of PNGs are really good. Now, there are some other image formats you should know about. This is the high efficiency image format, and you see it compared to a JPEG. It's a little bit smaller but a little bit higher quality supposedly, and you'll run into this format if you have an iOS device such as an iPhone. And the reason why is because they added this in, I think, 2017, and that is the ability to save your files in the high efficiency formats, and that means JPEG. And if you look at it, the HEIF and HEVC is H.265, and that is the same thing as JPEG H.264, except it's the next generation up. So you really want to go to the most compatible, most likely, and that's the JPEG H.264, because then you can open up those images in Photoshop or Premiere, and right now you cannot open up the HEIC images in Premiere or in Photoshop. So the other format you should have on your radar is called the WebP. This is a format that was created by Google, and it's actually the next generation of the original Flash format, Flash image format. And what they found was a way to take a JPEG image and compress it to even smaller. And so you can see this JPEG is 960 KB versus 200 kilobytes, and so that's what, almost 4 times less, and it's just as good a quality, and it's a lot smaller. So this is the same thing as the HEIC HEVC, and that is they're using the same codec for web pictures as well as web movies. And since they're using the same codec, that means the same compression type, the same mathematics. It's a really flexible format. Because the only difference between a picture and a movie is that a picture has one frame and a movie has multiple frames. And so the other nice thing about the WebP is that it also has transparency, just like a PNG. And so here you can see a lossless WebP is only 41K versus 61, and a lossy WebP, which is compressed similar to a JPEG, it also has transparency, but you can see it's only 18K versus 61. That's a really big image size format change, and WebPs are going to continue to be something that are on our radar as graphic designers for sure. Now, if you're trying to do animation, there are some different formats. One of those formats is the animated GIF, or sorry, the animated GIF versus the animated PNG. The animated GIF is kind of ubiquitous. That's what you see in memes all the time, you know. But the problem with this particular format is that it has aliased edges, and that means that they're really kind of sharp, and you can really see how they degrade the outer edges. Whereas a PNG has anti-aliased edges, they're nice and smooth, and you can see it looks much better. The problem with this format, though, is that you have to go to a website to be able to see that animation play. Right now you can't put that format in PowerPoint or something else. It's just not very ubiquitous yet. Now, which format do you use? It gets really confusing, of course, and so you have to think about what the use of that image is. And so for us, we're going to typically use raster images like JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, TIFFs, RAWs, and PSDs, and just be aware of when it says to use them. And we'll be very intentional about using an image format for a particular purpose in our projects. So at this point, we're going to do the Photoshop file types exercise. So I'm going to do things a little differently this time. I want you to go back to the folder that you created for this class. Your section number might be different, and I want you to create a subfolder called exercises. And the reason why is because best practice definitely is for us to put everything in that subfolder. Then I'm also going to create a subfolder for exercise Photoshop file types, and then go inside of there. Now we're going to add other files into here, but there's something that you definitely want to be aware of right now, and that is if you go up to the View tab, you can also do this on a Mac. I think you can right click on the folders. You want to make sure that you can see your file name extensions. It's so important that you see file name extensions on both a Mac and PC. That should be a standard across your computer. So we'll take a look at that here after we've done our image. So let's go back to Photoshop, and I want you to find this image where you are exploring, taking a tour of Photoshop. And I'll open that up again, and I'll close the Learn panel. I'll hit Next once and then close this because I don't want to see this thing anymore. Now, what happens with this image format is that you'll notice that we have a lot of different layers. And I can move around these different layers. I can move one to the bottom. So I'm actually going to put that room above the stars, kind of intentionally. And now I've got all the other graphics kind of in the front. Now with this, we want to make sure that we save this image as a format that we can open up later. But before we do that, I am going to do one thing. I want to go to the image size dialog and just see the fact that this image is a little bit big. I'm going to actually make it a little smaller by going to Resample, then I'm going to go to pixels, and I'm going to change this to just be 1,000 pixels wide. And the whole reason is just to make it a little bit smaller image so it doesn't take up quite as much file room. Now, with that image, I can zoom up a little bit with Alt and mouse wheel, or Control 0 will make it fill the screen. You can also do Control 1 to see it at its 100% full size. Now, with this image, I'm going to save this as a Photoshop document. So I'm going to go to Save, and let's go into that folder. So it should be on the desktop, Exercises, ExPSFileTypes, and I'm going to call this Room. Or actually, I'll call it Space Room, and then I'm going to put my initials, last name on it. Now notice that I'm not going to put in the exercise file name all the time, because the folder has that exercise name on it already. So when we get to submit this, we're actually going to zip this folder with all the different file types in there. Now, to save out a different file type, I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to choose a JPEG at this point. Now notice that when I choose the JPEG, it no longer shows me the original name there, and it also has a little check mark where it says Save as a Copy. And what that means is that this is saving a new file. So I'm going to hit Save, and now I have to be aware of what quality I'm going to save this at. Now I'm going to choose the smallest file size, but I don't want you to save yet. I'm going to choose the smallest file size so that I can then open it up and show you what happened. So there's the image that I created. It's really small, so I'm going to open that back in Photoshop, and there's a couple ways to do it. You can click and drag it right into the window, but do be aware you don't want to drag it into the active document, because that will try and place it into that document. Instead, I am going to drag it into the space above or beside that tab, and you'll see now it opens up that image. Now another way that we can open up this image is you can right click on it and choose Open With and tell it to open with Photoshop. If that comes open, okay, there it is. So now I can open it with Photoshop, and so that's another way to open it. Now if you take a look real quick, notice how bad this image is. It looks terrible, and that's because I applied a lot of compression to this file. So this is something you never ever want to do. You basically never want to use compression that's set to 0 on a JPEG. It's just always going to give you a horrible image. So instead, I'm going to go back and do Save As and choose the image format of JPEG. And so I'm going to replace that image, and it's going to ask me, are you sure? And I definitely want to save it. And this time I'm going to take it up, and I'm going to use about 11. You can take it to 12, but 11 is usually pretty good. 10 is okay. If you're doing something for a website and it's going to be a pretty big image, then maybe the quality should be set to 10, but I wouldn't go much below that 9, 10, or 11 or 12 for that. But I'm going to use 11 because that's kind of a good amount of compression typically. Now you'll see that that image is certainly going to be a lot smaller than the original Photoshop document. Now if you can't see the extensions, make sure you go to View and do File Extensions, because you can see right here I'm always going to refer to something as a JPEG or Bitmap. I'm sorry, JPEG or Photoshop. And even though you can see that in the type, I'm always wanting to see those file extensions. Super important. Now be aware that you cannot change an image from one format to another format simply by changing its file extension. If I go into here and I say, hey, I want this to be a PNG, that does not make this thing a PNG. In fact, when I open it, it might give me an error and say, hey, something is wrong. It actually opened up, which is surprising. Let's see what happens if I try and open it up in different software. Well, it actually is opening up once again, but that will definitely give you some errors if you try and do that. I'm not exactly sure why it's opening, but alright, so let's go back to the Photoshop. I'm going to make sure I don't have that file extension change on there. And now I'm going to save out another format. So let's save as and see what other formats that we might have in here. So here's a GIF format. We can save straight out of the save as a GIF. So when I save as a GIF, you'll notice that now I get to choose the number of colors. So I might say that I want only 8 colors in this, and I'm going to not worry about it. I'm just going to use the local selective, but just change it to 8 colors, hit OK, and let's see what happens when I open up that image. I'm going to open it up in my default viewing application. This is called XNView, and you'll see that if I get up close, you'll see that dithering pattern that a GIF gives you. Now you can also open that up in Photoshop, of course, just by dragging it down into the application. So if I do that, open that, then I can drag it up here and I can open it up. And so now you can really see side by side how the colors have been changed when you saved it from one format to another. And you can even see that your color mode now says index versus RGB. Now the last type of file format that we're going to use is going to be a Tiff file format, and that's because the Tiff file format is going to be one of those really common formats that we use for print. Now when we save this, it's really important that we know to turn off layers for a Tiff file. So important that you turn off those Tiff layers, because otherwise it's going to be like you're saving a Photoshop. It's going to be a really large file. So I'm going to hit save at this point, and you'll see that it comes up with types of compression. And so LZW is a very common lossless image compression for TIFFs. You could also use zip. It wouldn't really matter, but it's just something to be aware of. LZW is kind of the common one. And then I'm going to go ahead and discard those layers. I'll click OK. And you'll see that we have a TIFF file here, and it's a fairly large file, but it is a really nice high quality file, which is very important about that TIFF. So let's go ahead, and I don't think we've done any other changes at this point. So that's pretty much it for the saving out the different file types. We will explore file types in the future for sure. So now that this file types is done, you have a GIF, you have a PNG. Oh, that's what we're missing, is a PNG. I knew there was something we were missing. So I'll open it back up, go to File, Save As, choose my format as a PNG, and then hit save. Now what type of sizing do you want to do? Medium file size is generally pretty good. You might want smallest file size when you are trying to save things for the web. That just does a little bit more computations. I'll use medium for right now. A lot of times you won't see any kind of options for saving the different types of compression with your PNGs. That's something that you see in Photoshop. Now you can see we have that PNG, and the PNG, JPEG, GIF or GIF, and the TIFF file and the Photoshop file. We've saved out 4 different types of files, or 5 different types of files, and they're all basically there for different purposes. Now what we want to do is go ahead and submit this assignment. And the way to do that is to add your name to the end of it. Make sure that you've closed the files so they're not open in Photoshop anymore. And then typically go to that folder and put your initials and last name, typically. Oh, see, it's being a bit of a pain, but I won't worry about that too much. You can actually even do it inside here. You can select all those files, you can right click, then you can go to send to compressed zip folder. Wow, something is happening on my computer where it thinks that these files are being opened. So I'm going to close Photoshop. Let's see if this works now. J. Ross. Yeah, so for some reason Photoshop was thinking that I still had it open. These are things that you're going to have to troubleshoot all the time. So welcome to, dealing with a lot of files, I probably don't need that debug file, because now it does exactly what I want, which is I put my name on that folder. Now I right click on that folder, I'm going to go to send to compressed zipped folder. See, there is something that's happening that's weird on my computer. Hopefully you're not experiencing this, so I'm going to try and use 7-zip instead. Yeah, I've got something going on my computer. So I'm going to use 7-zip because it's a really nice utility for using zip. You might want to install 7-zip as well, but there's a lot of other zip utilities for the PC. Make sure that you're finding one that has good reviews and is free and open source and doesn't install any weird stuff on your computer. But now I have that zip file, and that's what you're going to submit in the assignment. Sorry that was a little bit messy there at the end. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.